Please welcome the President and CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council, Julia Simpson.
Your Excellencies, Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, His Excellency Prosper Bazombanza, Vice President of the Republic of Burundi, our gracious host, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of this wonderful country, Rwanda, ministers, esteemed delegates, and dear friends, Murakaza neza. Welcome to WTTC's 2023 Global Summit. As Arnold said, our first ever Global Summit in Africa, and I have to say, it's about time. Being here in Rwanda, for me personally, is truly special. The first time I came to Kigali, I had my suitcase fully packed with preconceptions. A young man collected me from the airport. It was early morning, the air was sweet, the roads were lined with lush borders, and an army of really smart people were on their way to work. So I thought, I asked him, where do most people work? I asked. Well, a few years ago, lots of people worked for the government here in Rwanda, but now we have been encouraged and supported to set up our own businesses. Actually, he said, I have a tech startup in travel and tourism. Wow! I'd only been in Rwanda for 5 minutes and I meet a young man with a tech startup in travel and tourism. Well, 10 years ago, Rwanda didn't even rank in the top 150 countries for ease of doing business. Today, it's in the top 20. You can register a new company, how many hours? 6 hours. So this guy was amazing. So I said to him, listen, I'm a business person. I often don't get to see as much of a country as I'd like to. If there's one thing I simply must do while I'm here, what would you recommend? I have to be honest, I was expecting him to say, please go and see the mountain gorillas. And he paused and he thought. And he said, whatever you do, make sure you get to the Kigali Genocide Memorial. He said, it's not an easy place to visit. But if you understand our history, you will understand Rwanda. This ambitious young man was wise beyond his years. To have a future, he, like Rwanda, has embraced his past. Because this country, almost 30 years ago, was torn apart. 3 decades, almost 3 decades on, it's a nation transformed, strong, united, successful. Today, travel and tourism is the single largest source of foreign earnings. By the end of 2023, the end of this year, it's forecast to be 8.2% of this country's GDP and employing, as Arnold said, over 350,000 people. That's what we mean when we talk about the economic opportunity of travel. And it's not just Rwanda. I had the great privilege of meeting the president, and he said to me about this summit, this summit is not just about Rwanda, it is about Africa. Africa, this remarkable continent, has transformed too. Our vice chair, Manfredi Lefebvre is a long-standing investor and traveller here and has been the inspiration behind coming here today. In just 2 decades, tourism on the continent of Africa has more than doubled. 84 million international visitors added $186 billion to Africa's bottom line. That's 7% of the whole continent's economy. And the forecast over the next 10 years is even brighter. Africa's tourism sector is set to grow by 5.1% every year, annualized, almost twice as fast as the general economy. Now, my second visit to Rwanda was earlier this year. I had the great privilege and honor to be invited to attend the Women Deliver Summit here in Kigali. It is the biggest conference on gender equality globally. 6,000 people packed an arena listening to Malala. And 250,000 people joined online. This is another example, another first for Rwanda. And it was a great honor to hear President Kagame speak of the economic and social value that gender equality brings to this country. And you know, I'm a woman and I'm not that young. I've heard this often, but here it is not just talk. The Rwandan parliament has the largest percentage of women in the world, of any parliament in the world. 61%. And close to my heart, look at Yvonne Makolo, CEO of Rwandair, the first female chair of IATA and the first African chair of IATA. I congratulate her. Tomorrow, WTTC with AIG and Hospitable Me adds its voice to the diversity and equity discussion. And what it looks at is real progress is not just about the makeup of our sector, but it's how we welcome difference, how we take care of people, our own people and our customers, how we create a sense of belonging, a sense of home. This report gives life to the Latin term hospice, a word that in one word embraces both the guest and the host, whatever their background, whatever their beliefs, whatever their sexuality. It made me think of that line by Mark Twain: travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. I really can't leave without mentioning my other big encounter here, which of course was with the famous Rwandan gorillas. In the 1980s, there were under 200 mountain gorillas left on this planet. They were on the brink of extinction from poaching and from deforestation. Today, there are over 1,600. They know that because they do a census every year. And the reason the gorillas were saved is actually really simple: travel and tourism. But not any old tourism, but a business model that puts a financial premium on a once-in-a-lifetime experience, puts a premium on the gorillas' right to coexist with us, and puts a premium on local people. Farmers who once earned a living turning forests into fields now make more by replanting those forests. And more remarkable still is when the gorillas wander over the border, Rwanda splits the revenue with its neighboring countries. I actually can't think of a more perfect metaphor for the kind of cross-border collaboration we need in the fight against climate change and nature loss. I am truly proud that the WTTC, supported by Saudi Arabia, can now actually monitor our whole sector's global environmental and social footprint. We can do it by 185 countries, we can do it year by year, and we can do it by individual industry. That allows us to lead the debate with governments, and more importantly, pinpoints exactly where we need changes and shifts of policy. So what has all this data shown us? The headline is that travel and tourism's footprint is being decoupled from its growth. So while travel and tourism GDP grew by 4.3%, annually emissions grew at 2.5%. Already 135 countries saw declining emissions intensity, and 15 have seen their absolute greenhouse gas emissions decrease despite growing their tourism sector. Our sector globally is still less emissions intensive than the wider economy. In 2019, at its peak, travel and tourism represented 8.1% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the world, 10.6% of total energy use, and 0.9% of global water use. Now, 0.9% of global water use might not seem a lot, but it's not evenly spread. And in countries like Rwanda and parts of Africa, that water is precious. And I'm proud to say the hotel I'm staying in recycles water. It's an incredible example of what can be done. Now, these are all numbers. What you would really expect from a business that's in travel and tourism is that transport makes up the most of our sector's greenhouse gas emissions at about 40%. And energy use, the electricity we use to turn the lights on, is about 20%. Now, out of the transport, 40%, about 36% of that comes from international aviation. This means the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions is not the plane that I've flown here to visit Rwanda, but it is actually our ground transport. That's why one of our top priorities should be to move to electric vehicles in our businesses and in our supply chains. And in the hard-to-abate area of jet fuel for aviation, we need to support the urgent production of sustainable aviation fuels. Hats off to the US and to the EU that have launched legislation to support and incentivize more SAF production. But the truth is, right now, we're simply not making enough. So I urge every minister in this room, take a look at sustainable aviation fuel production in your country. It's actually quite a good investment opportunity as well. And take a look at the electrification of your ground vehicles and see how much energy you can produce as renewable energy. Because if we can crack those three, we will massively reduce the impact on the environment from our family, the travel and tourism sector. Now, please let me end and also start this journey on Africa. Today, with VFS, we are publishing a report on the potential size of travel and tourism across this continent. We know there are challenges: air connectivity within the region, infrastructure, and visas. Or should I say sometimes the lack of visas. Visa regimes are a major challenge to this sector globally. And in Africa, it is an own goal. Rwanda sets a wonderful example with visas on arrival. But, you know, I remember talking to the South African minister, and she was saying to me, how can it make sense, Julia, for a Ghanaian businesswoman to wait several months to get a visa to visit my country in South Africa? And I know she's doing something about it. Our report shows that with the right vision, travel and tourism could increase Africa's gross domestic product by $50 billion by 2033 and create 6 million more jobs. Truly, truly a continent of promise. Despite everything we have been through, the financial crisis, the pandemic, the struggle to reopen, our sector is incredibly resilient. But now we are seeing heart-wrenching scenes of war. Our sector, at its core, is about peace. Travel and tourism is the very, very essence of soft power, building bridges, building understanding, building compassion. Rwanda is a living example of hope and strength and success after adversity. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful summit.